we are. Episode number 5.
5?
Which is crazy to think about. We are out here with a brand new setup.
We're trying.
Brand new setup. If you can't tell, we are having a new setup. We have moved from the dining room area to be in the studio. Yeah. New studio, actually. This isn't even the original studio.
No, this is the guest room.
Yeah, so this is a guest room now turned studio, and now the other studio will be turned guest room.
Yeah, something like that.
But we want to try something out. We have a really cool makeshift setup on the other side of this camera that Xiomi did, which is super cool.
We tried.
And
do you like my strawberry table?
Yes, her strawberry table.
I fought hard for it.
Yeah, so new setup, guys. Exciting things on the horizon. Some guests joining the podcast very soon. It's going to be great. So we are excited to keep this thing going. Yeah. Episode 5, we're going strong. Yeah. Appreciate all the love, all the support, watching on YouTube, watching on Spotify, listening on Apple Music. Just awesome. Yeah. But today we got something interesting. I mean, everything's interesting here at the Oyuda household and with Coffee or Friends. But
yeah, what you don't know is that the other side of this door is a disaster.
Oh my gosh, guys.
It is an absolute disaster.
It is so bad. It's a mess.
It makes me kind of anxious.
It really does. I hate clutter, and it is a war zone out there. But we did a lot of just readjusting.
We're trying.
Get the setup. Yeah. You'll be seeing some new stuff added as we're figuring this out. But anyway, let's jump right into it. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that a lot of people have been struggling with, dealing with in this season. Mm-hmm. These past couple episodes, we've kind of shared more so our experience with things and have shared our thoughts on, lamenting and mental health. I love you, please stay. Vision behind why we're doing this. We want to start really going into some questions that the public are asking, or just questions that we see people in our community dealing with. Yes. And give just some practical insight.
Yes.
And today we'll be talking about transition.
Is water wet?
Yeah, we don't want to go there.
Okay.
Water is wet because it in and of itself causes things to be in the state of wetness. So how can something that causes other things to be wet not be wet in and of itself when its existence and properties literally do that for other things?
So if you're 70% water, correct, are you wet?
Absolutely. I'm dripping. I am straight.
You are moist.
Flooding right now. Yeah. I am wet.
Gross.
Internally. If you were to cut me open, I'm wet. My blood, wet. Organs, all that stuff. We're wet. Yeah. Is fire?
Nah, it doesn't work.
Point is, anyway.
It didn't work. You tried.
Water is wet. If you don't believe me or don't agree with me, fight me.
Is the earth flat?
Oh, we don't want to go there, guys. We do not want to go there.
Maybe another
time. The earth is a football.
A football?
It's an ellipse. It's not fully a circle. It's not like perfectly round. It's kind of like an oval-ish with ridges. It's not perfectly like a sphere. But it is not flat.
Okay.
Anyway, what's beyond the ice wall, guys? And I'm not going to get there. Maybe that'll be for another episode. We'll go.
I wouldn't have answers to that. I just wanted to ask.
Anyway, so transition, guys.
Yes.
It's something we all deal with. It is something that could be extremely long or extremely short, but it is part of life. And it sucks. It's hard. But it is an opportunity, and that's really what we want you guys to leave with tonight.
For sure.
So what we're going to be doing is kind of like interview style here. We're going to try something a little bit different. These past couple episodes, we've been just kind of like talking and just sharing thoughts. But here we're going to kind of ask each other questions and then answer them and go from there. So we ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it. We got some questions right here. We're going to go ahead and answer these things and get going. So question number 1 is for you.
Oh, for me.
How have you navigated and are currently navigating transition in your life?
That's not a simple question.
But we don't do no simple questions here in the Coffee with Friends podcast.
I have to read it so that it's a long question.
Yes. Yes. It's a two-part
How
question.
have you navigated? Are you navigating transition? I'm gonna try to keep it short. That just means it's still not gonna be short. How have I navigated? I think not very well. I've not done a very good job of navigating transition. I think now I'm a lot better, but if you were going to take it from like even just from when we met, there was a lot of transition in that moment. I quit my job. I met you. I moved out for the first time.
Yeah, you did.
Within like the span
That's a
of
lot.
4 months or something like that. None of that went well except for my job. That's probably the only good part about that. Outside of that, it was hard. Moved out of my parents' house. Lived out of my parents' house. December, January, February, March, April. 5 months. I didn't even make it 6 months out of my parents' house. Moved back home in April. Then we broke up.
Yeah.
And then that was another transition. Back home and single. That didn't go over very well. I think the only good thing that came of that was the book that I released, which you mentioned last time.
Last podcast, yeah.
And my job was still good.
Yeah.
I think that was very constant in that season of my life was my job. I had a really good job with some really good bosses and really good people around me that really helped me navigate this transition into like back to being single and back to being home. But I didn't do a very good job because I also transitioned out of the church.
You did, yeah.
Well, right before we met, I transitioned. I had just left, or we had transitioned out of a different church that I'd been there for about 12 years.
Yeah.
So when we met, I was still figuring that out, even though it'd been some time. None of that I did well. And the only consistent thing was my job, my family, and I still loved God. I mean, I still wanted to be near him and close to him. Wasn't doing a very good job.
Yeah.
So how I navigated that, not well. I did a lot of things. I spent a lot of time. I wasted a lot of time. I wasted a lot of money. I wasn't like solely focused on a goal. I was just kind of like in the air.
Like cruising.
Yeah. I was just like doing things. I didn't really have anything I was working towards. And I mean, I was around a lot of people who also were in that same space.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really motivate you to pursue anything outside of that. Like you're just out, you're having fun. I was young, but I was like in my mid 20s. I was 25, 26.
Yeah.
And so like I was just doing nothing. I was doing nothing. Then I moved to Houston, and then pandemic happened. I lost my job
for everybody.
Yeah, I lost my job. Moved to Houston mid-pandemic, so I left my friends, my family, and I started EMT school. And
Which not a lot of people know that.
This is true. It's not a well-known fact. Started a job at Amazon. Lived alone in Houston. Oh, I had a roommate, but like I didn't do that very well either. I just spent a lot of time watching TV and eating. Didn't go to church. Wasn't connected anywhere. And I just had you. And you would come over and you'd play video games.
Play Warzone, peak Warzone 2020.
Didn't handle that well either. Then we got married. And then we moved here.
That's a big one.
And that also didn't go well. I also didn't do that very well.
That was tough.
It was hard. We would go days we lived in the same house, and we maybe didn't. There was like days that we didn't talk. And we would just like
Yeah.
We were just trying to get to the next day.
Yeah.
Really. I think we were both struggling with that
Oh yeah,
transition at the
definitely.
time.
Absolutely.
I had different struggles than he did.
Yeah.
Um, I came here, I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. I just had Sam. And we had the church we were going at, but when you're new, it's different. Didn't do that very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I struggled a lot of it. I felt a lot of anger because after so much transition, I still didn't feel like I had a place. I still felt very out of place in my transitions. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know. I knew why Sam was here. I knew why we were here, and I felt in that time I was like, we're only here because you got to be here.
Yeah.
And that first year, I felt a lot of jealousy because he had a place, and I was just floating.
Yeah.
I was just didn't know what I was doing. I was in coffee and I loved coffee, but it just didn't feel like home. It didn't feel like my place.
Yeah.
And I felt very jealous that Sam had something or appeared to. Like from the outside, it was
Yeah.
like, gosh, like you are actually
Yeah.
doing what you've always wanted to do, which is work in ministry, work for the church, which was something that I've always wanted
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
And I'm still not doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also shifted now after 2 years of being here. I am finally finding my place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just took a lot of inward looking. Like I had to really look within myself and okay, like I want to work for the church. As of now, not really the reality or something that is possible.
Yeah.
But why? Why do I want to work in the church so badly? Like what about that is so attractive to me? Outside of like I lead a worship, like outside of all of these things, like why do I really want to? And at the end of it all is like I just love serving people.
Yeah.
It's why I love the service industry. It's why I think it's so fun and it's exciting. It's because it's knowing people and learning people and having regulars and serving people and them leaving having a brilliant experience, whether it's just a latte or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I felt like I could make even a simple difference.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started to really want to open our home to others and host at whatever capacity, and dreaming of dinner parties and dreaming of just hangouts to have people in. And that still took time. Like it wasn't right away. I think we had so many conversations and then all the logical pieces,
Yeah. Yeah.
space and seating and those things. I don't particularly care for those things. Like I do, but I just don't think they're like the all.
Yeah.
I think if people want to be there, they're gonna be there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until this year, like that's kind of like my way of doing ministry and working for this church is serving.
Yeah.
And that's where like Coffee with Friend came into play.
Yeah.
And it kind of fills that gap that I'd been feeling for a long time, and knowing that I've always wanted to work in the church, not being able to, but finding a way to still serve my community and the people that I love and enjoy and the people they love, and bringing that and creating that space into something bigger than what I wanted it to be. And so I think for many years I handled transition, I thought doing a good job, but spent most of it not doing anything, not appreciating the time, not appreciating what I could have learned, and just kind of squandered it.
Yeah.
And now, in hindsight, I can see the things that I've learned, and I'm using them now to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't handling it well then. I'm looking at it through a different lens now, into the lens of like what I truly desire for myself. And while I'm not where I want to be, like I don't think a lot of us are. I'm not like where I exactly want to be, but I can use the space I'm in and still do what I want to do, regardless of where I want to be.
I think where everyone is
Yeah.
at, or where everyone, what everyone feels, and kind of how people react to transition is kind of
Yeah.
the same way. Obviously, everyone's different and
Yeah.
it looks different, but
Yeah.
I think what you just explained and taking us into your relationship
Yeah.
with it is pretty much the end all be all for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to squander it. We tend to float and cruise by and drift
Yeah.
by and not really take advantage of a transition, which we'll get into later.
Yeah,
So
that's for sure.
awesome.
Okay.
Question number 2.
What's the hardest part of transition?
Again, obviously these are going to be, everyone has their own
Right.
answer, but I think there's a universal truth that we all share. I think for me, when I think of what's the hardest part, what's been the hardest part about transition is obviously transition in and of itself is leaving from one state to another, being like in one place, being one thing, and completely moving from that into the unknown. For me, the biggest, like the hardest thing is the fear of the unknown. I think that's what's the hardest for me, and I hate that.
Yeah.
I want to know what's in front of me.
Yeah.
I want to know what's happening.
Yeah.
I want to have a plan. So when I don't see that, when there's a fog, when there's thin ice, and I'm not sure, the fear of the unknown is the hardest part for me when it comes to transition.
Yeah.
I think practically, obviously, it's what's hard too is, again, leaving friends, family, or the job you had, whatever, like leaving from that place, that state you were in, and going to another state, turning from a liquid to a gas to a solid, whatever. Like when you're changing from one to this, A to B, that's hard. Change is hard. We don't like it. We're humans. We're creatures of habit. So I think for me personally, it's the fear of the unknown. But I think if we were to encompass it in an umbrella that humans and the human condition can all agree with, is I think of just the changing from being in one state to another, the losing of things, friends, family, job, security.
Sure.
That's the hardest part for me, and I think for a lot of us, and that's what makes transition, I think, difficult. Because if that didn't exist, then transition would be easy,
Sure.
and we wouldn't mind it. But I think that's why we mind it. That's why we hate it. That's why we loathe transition. Even the good ones, sometimes they're hard. It's, for example, very briefly, promotion. That's a transition. But things are lost and things are gained with that are good and bad. So it's the changing of state.
Yeah.
I guess. So that's my answer to that. Hopefully that was a good one. Anyway, question number 3. What is the growing pain or the growing pains in transition?
I think one of the things you mentioned was loss.
Correct.
There can be a lot of loss in transition.
That's very true.
Even promotions. Even in good transition, there is loss. You lose something in transition. Yes, we gain a lot of things. I think
Correct.
we gain more than we lose.
Oh, yeah.
But you're human. And we tend to focus on the lost pretty consistently.
That's true.
It stands out because it hurts. Because there's a feeling attached to it. Like, yes, there's excitement, but we feel hurt. We feel the pain of loss. I think overshadows the excitement of something new. And
I love it you said that.
I don't
It
think
stands out because it hurts.
It stands out.
Yeah.
I mean, I moved here and it was great, but I left so much behind.
Yeah.
That hurt.
Yeah.
That hurt. And it takes time to acclimate to that change, to that transition. It takes time. Could be days, months. For me, it took years. It took me a while. So I think one of the big growing pains of transitions is loss. It's the one we feel a lot, and that's a big pain. And I think we all agree that is probably one of the primary pains of transition. Change is transition.
Yeah.
I think I'll just leave it at loss.
Yeah.
This is what I can think of.
Yeah, I wrote that down because I want to revisit that because I think that's going to be what helps tie this together in our response and answer to transition is what you said. I think segues into it, so I'll save it for later. But that phrase that it stands out because it hurts, and that's so good and so true. But again, I think that's gonna come in a little bit later and be part of the answer. That was awesome. Question number 4. Or the next one.
How do you keep your heart pure and tender through transition? I love that you wrote this for you.
Well,
it's good. It's good that you wrote this for you.
Put in like, oh, I want this person to answer and this person. It was more just
you did this to yourself on accident. This is great. This was good because this is you struggle with this. Man, you fight with this a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of glad that it's you because I'm a simple person.
Yes.
I'm more go with the flow.
Yes.
I'm easygoing. I'm just like, it's going to happen.
You keep your heart and mind very neutral. And you take things as they are and you don't let them affect you as much. Yeah, for me, it's hard.
They affect me. I'm different.
You're different.
I react differently to it.
Yeah, I mean, man.
So I'll ask it again because I didn't really ask it truly. I said, so how do you keep your heart pure and tender through transition?
Man.
So good.
I think the way that you keep your heart, and your mind and your soul tender and soft and open to transition is you learn how to live content. You learn how to take transition and trial with content. The only way you can really keep your heart tender is really by one, keeping it open, and being the antithesis of keeping it hardened, having a hardened heart. Having a hardened heart is due to a lot of things, but it's usually anger, resentment, guilt, shame. So what is the opposite of that? It's joy, love, peace, gratitude. So you keep your heart tender by having a perspective and a gaze that's fixated on gratitude, joy, peace, and love.
What is, for us regular folk, what is antithesis?
The opposite, right? So, so the opposite of all those things would be that.
Okay.
And I think that, for your heart to be tender, for your heart to be open, like you have to not be hard. And so then therefore you eliminate what hardens the heart. Right. What hardens the heart? The things I just said. And what's the opposite? What's the antidote? That's another word for antithesis. Like, what's the antidote of that? It's gratitude, joy, love, peace. So how do you do that with transition? Well, it's looking at the transition and not looking at it as loss, as a trial, as suffering, but to look at it as an opportunity and to be grateful and thankful that you're going through it for something. The best person I can attribute that to, the best story, which I won't get into because that in and of itself is a whole pod. Job, man, whew, gosh,
that's a good guy.
You are content and you know who God is and you know that he's faithful.
Yeah,
that is how you keep your heart tender and pure, in my opinion. It's a tough one and it's a hard one for me.
Let's hard for me. I want to ask another question.
Go for it.
What of those? Okay, I think that's a great answer. I think it's a great answer for chosen transition.
Wow.
What of those transitions we don't choose?
Wow. Great question.
Thank you.
Man. Yeah. Oh man. So I mean, there's certain transitions that, God ordains for us as a character arc.
Like Job.
Yeah. It's a character arc.
Pick that.
My anime fans out there, it's a training arc. It's development, right? You too can be a hero. Shout out My Hero Academia. But anyway, but then there's transitions that you didn't ask for. how do you keep your heart tender then? I think, again, it's living a life of selfless gratitude, just like a vicious and like unapologetic gratitude. I think that if you live your life that way, there's a sense of, again, there's a sense of focusing
Yeah.
on what's true, what's good, fixing your eyes above on the things above, even when it's transition that's uninvited. I think that if you have that perspective, that heavenly perspective, it allows you to go through it with hope. And I think that hope is that thing.
Mm-hmm.
That hope and faith is what helps you, especially with the unwanted transition, to go through it, because you know that there's something on the other side. It's what you don't see. It's, it's the unseen, evidence of things unseen. Sure. And I think like that is what helps with the unwanted transition, because again, like the only thing you have left is gratitude and thankfulness, and that's what keeps your heart open at all times. So, but that's a great question, because there is unwanted transition, things we didn't ask for, that it's easy when it's good for you, or when it's needed, when it's
for sure.
It's tough when it's not. Okay, this is a question that's for both of us, but I want you to go first. What advice would you give to anyone who's dealing with transition right now in this moment?
What advice? It's hard not to say the things you just said, because it is a good response. It is a good thing to look at, to think about, to say. It's like this. It's what they tell you when you're swimming in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And the current. You hit the current.
Yeah.
And they tell you just to let the current carry you, and like not to fight the current,
riptide,
or you'll drown.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. Do that. Just go with it. Go with it. Embrace it. It's going to be hard. There's no real answer to this. But that's what I do. That I can only speak from what I do. And I just let it go. Like, I just surrender that. Like, I'm like, okay, I can't fight it because it's inevitable. It's gonna happen. And the more I fight it, the only one that loses is me.
Wow.
I'm the only one that loses there. If I start to fight it, I'm gonna get tired, and what's gonna happen? It's gonna carry me anyway.
Yeah.
At the end, it doesn't matter how much you do. It would have to be like a drastic something for you to like go against that transition, but it would just carry you into another transition.
You regress.
Yeah. And so, you can fight it for as long as you want, but at the end of the day, that transition is going to carry out through the end. And the only thing that you'd have lost is time, energy, strength. You'd lost hope, faith, joy. You'd be lost in a hardened heart when you can just let it, in the words of Elsa herself, let it go. You just, that's, I think, for me, that's like the easiest way I could phrase it, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy.
Absolutely.
It just means that it's going to be easier.
Yeah.
It's not going to be so, you're just going to surrender and let the current take you. And I think that's where you and I are so different.
Correct.
Because I'm just like, well,
surrender.
Here we go, and I go with whatever the flow is going, and I find my solutions and like things on the way. I'm like, okay, well, there are things out of my control that I'm literally like, nothing I can do here, and I move on.
Yeah.
And while sometimes Sam is still toiling with this thing, and I'm like, dude, like, you gotta let it just be. That. You just gotta let it go, like, move on, because we're wasting time.
Yeah.
We've gone in circles. We're wasting time. Let's move on to the next thing that might take me into something different. And so my advice, all in all, is just flow in that transition.
I love that.
Be like water. Just go with it.
Embrace the waves of transition. I love that. I love that. Embracing the waves of transition and getting sucked under the undertow and the riptide and letting it take you and not fighting it. Not swimming against the current, not swimming against the flow. I love that. Because, yeah, it's so true, because then you regress. But even more so, you tire yourself out. Yeah. Same thing with quicksand. You're not supposed to fight it, right? It's the same, which is so funny. I think God is so funny that he does that. That he creates these things.
Funniest guy around.
Yeah, and that the answer and solution is to actually stop and surrender. And, yeah, it goes back to what we talked about last week. And I love it, and it's so true, and it's so needed for guys and girls, men, all of us, but people like us who tend to want to fight and swim against. And this is a good word for us. It's a healthy and it's a reminder for us to let go, surrender, and let it take you. Because it's funny, and we see it in movies when people get shipwrecked and then they get on a little piece of wood and then days later they float onto an island.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, they were knocked out or they fell asleep and then they woke up there. I would love, if that were me, I would love that to be the case rather than me being like Life of Pi and I'm on here like building a raft and trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I'd rather be knocked out and wake up on the shore.
Yeah. And
I think that's the way we need to view transition, in that sense of like, just let it knock you out and show up on the shore when it's time. So I love that. The embrace the waves of transition. Like, I love that. Cause again, for us, people like us, maybe you relate, who's watching or listening, if you're like me, who doesn't like that. It's a timely word for us, cause sometimes we can do more damage. What I will say, interestingly enough, is my answer won't be the typical answer of like the fight and toil. I think it can apply to other things, but I think for transition, I agree. I think it's, you don't fight it. Don't try to find the answer. Don't try to get out early. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Don't get out early. It's funny. There's a saying that my grandpa always told me. It's in Spanish. No quemas etapa, which means essentially don't burn through a season. Don't burn through a phase. Don't burn through a season. Like, just let it happen and don't try to rush it. And I found myself doing that a lot. I love rushing things and jumping. And I think that would be my advice, is don't jump this season. Don't try to like double hop.
Yeah.
The transition, because again, I think you do more harm. You regress, you tire yourself out. Because the thing is, here's a funny part. Once you pass a transition, guess what? Another coming.
Another one. Yeah.
And you need all the strength and mental fortitude and spiritual fortitude to be ready to attack that. So yeah.
Yeah. And I had two thoughts while you were talking about trying to rush through a transition can bring you to a state of burnout. Mm-hmm. And that could be for another time.
We're going to be talking about that.
I think that trying and fighting and toiling through a transition into your next one and trying to skip things, it could bring you into a place of burnout and not wanting to do anything at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. The other thought I had was that statement, that phrase that Judah said.
I was just about to say.
I feel like is perfect.
How could I drown? How can I drown in my tears if my Savior walks on water?
Correct. And I feel the same about transition.
Absolutely.
How can I be so afraid of the unknown, knowing that the Creator has already made the beginning the end? He's already done it all.
He's writing your story.
And how can we fear?
He's the author.
The one man.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That.
He wrote it out.
And if he works to get all things together for my good, what do I have to be afraid of? What do I have to fear?
Absolutely.
And so to what you said, that your fear of the unknown,
yes.
like you have essentially nothing really to fear because the plan is already perfect.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what it has to be.
Yeah, I mean,
if we go through the transition
correct.
The way that we should go through transition.
And that's the key. It's doing it the right way.
Right.
It's transitioning the right way.
Yeah.
Because he has good plans for those who love him. that could be a whole other thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like he has, and it's again, and it's funny, you know, we hear these things and they're very rudimentary, they're elementary, but they're so true, and it's actually often the things we forget.
Yeah.
It's often the things we overlook, but it's so true. He has good plans, you know. If he cares for the birds of the sky and the fish of the sea, how much more we care for you. I mean, I could throw you verse, but it kind of goes into a community night we had last time. About, again, and I think we shared this in the pod too, about the whole, you can believe it with your lips but not with your heart. And I think there's a big it's a big indicator of I don't know, it's just, there's just so much there. But what I really, so, I mean, that's great. The other thing I had, so it's funny you said that about, you know, the quote Judah had. The image that I had right now as we were talking, that I don't think most people would use it for transition, but I'm going to use it for transition because I think there's a facet of that maybe we're missing. But Jesus on the boat in the Sea of Galilee with the disciples. We often use that example to talk about fear. And, you know, there's a storm around. He's our firm foundation, you know. But I would actually go as far to say that I think that applies with transition too. Like, the disciples were running around with their heads cut off, freaking out, tripping about the storm, and Jesus was what? Sleeping, resting. Yeah. The storm all around. Yeah. And that's transition. It's a storm all around. And you have two choices. You can be like the disciples, you can be like Jesus. Even further, you can be like Peter, or you can be like Jesus. You could walk on the water and drown. And what's funny is he'll always pick you up, or you could have that faith and keep going. But I think it's like that image of the storm and in the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus just resting and just taking it easy and not being fazed by the unknown that was outside that boat. I think it's a callback. It's a reminder for us to navigate transition the same way.
But I mean, to even think about, when did Peter start to sink into the water? It's when his gaze left.
Which segues perfectly into Jesus. So that segues perfectly into now kind of like our practical takeaways. You are for transition and dealing with it, and the antithesis, the antithesi, I think that's the plural or whatever.
The opposite
of this. Yeah. And it's one, I want to harken back to what you said before about it stands out because it hurts. When you said that, the first thing that popped up to my head is it stands out because it hurts, because it's a perspective problem. It is a POV issue. The reason why is because we focus on the hurt. Yeah. This also harkens back to a podcast we did. I don't remember which one, but it was the one where we were talking and I was saying, keeping your eyes on the issue and how it robs you from keeping your eyes on him. And that elevates your sin, that elevates your pain, right? I think it was the first one. So it's a perspective thing.
Sure.
It hurts, but it stands out because it hurts. Now, here's the main thing I would say in Spanish. Ojo.
If watch you out. Don't stop.
My Spanish speakers, you guys get it. But watch out, because this doesn't mean ignore the pain. Don't ignore it. Because we can easily fall into the trap of ignoring the pain and trying to numb the pain. And that's also incorrect. But it is a perspective shift from not focusing on the pain, but shifting our eyes towards Jesus, like what Peter didn't do. In this case, he didn't focus on the pain. He focused on his unbelief. Yeah. So it's a perspective shift. 1, 2, embracing the waves of transition, which you said, letting it happen, going with the flow, and allowing God to work his plan, which he works all plans for our good, and he has good plans and better plans we can ever imagine.
And that's not to say that pain is bad. Correct. And that's not to say that, because you feel pain, transition is bad.
Correct.
So don't think, just the perspective change is good.
Yes.
But understanding the pain is also
yes.
good.
Yeah, it's needed.
Yeah, there's
growing pains.
Yeah,
it's growing pains. I used to have them all the time.
Your bones hurt.
Yep.
Everything hurts.
I used to have them all the time behind
Your
my knees, growing
baby's
pains.
teeth, that hurts.
When you're working out,
that hurt. The gains hurt.
Yeah, I mean, it's pain is a necessary evil for survival and growth. But yeah, it's a perspective thing. It's it's what are you fixing your eyes on? That's why in the Bible it says focus your eyes on the things above. Because there's a difference. It's not numbing it and ignoring it, but it's focus. It's yes, you're there, but this right here is what matters.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal a quote from George Janko, who also stole it from his mother. Stop telling God your problems until tell your problems how big your God is. He says it all the time. It's true. It's true. Like that's the perspective idea. That's the concept. The kind of like last practical thing that we want to share with you guys is being content in every season. I shared this in the beginning, and I said we're gonna go back to this, but being content in every season is the antithesis. The antithesis of not being content in every season, again, is gratitude, thankfulness, all that stuff. But look at the life of Paul and the disciples. They mastered this, being content in every season, dealing with a thorn in your side. Paul said it. Being content in every season. And by the way, these guys, we think our problems are tough. We're not being persecuted. We're not being martyred yet. But these guys were, and they were content. These guys were in jail, and they were content. They worshiped. And then, of course, walls fell, chains fell. But they mastered this concept of being content in every season, and their life sucked.
Yeah.
But I think that's a big key of the being content and learning how to be content in every season, which isn't easy. But if we have the perspective shift, right, if we have the embracing of the waves of transition, those things help us be content in each season and take that and then not look at transition as a crutch, but as an opportunity. So that's kind of like the last thing, practical takeaway that I wanted us to kind of share, because again, I think that all this is great. I'm just gonna be honest, right? Like, I was having a conversation with a gentleman today, and I told him the same thing. It's like, you can hear great stuff. You can turn this off and listen to people who are way smarter than us, way more equipped, and they can give you the best sermons, the best 5 steps to whatever. But at the end of the day, none of that really matters. Because when push comes to shove, like, all that goes out the door. We see this a lot when people are drowning. It's really interesting. When people are drowning and a lifeguard comes in to save them, all reason, all knowledge goes out the door. A sane, mature, smart human being, the lifeguard jumps in, you listen to what they say, you do what they ask, you hold the little life thingy, the little floaty thing, you let them take you and swim you over to the shore of the boat. What happens in those moments? Tunnel vision. All that goes out the window. They start grabbing the person, drowning them because they're trying to float and they're trying to survive, and they push the lifeguard down. They start panicking because you're in survival mode and you're in fear mode. And that's what happens very often when people are drowning and a lifeguard goes to save them. Usually they end up pulling them down, not listening to what they're saying. They're freaking out, and they're always like, calm down, calm down, calm down. Listen to the sound of my voice. Because what happens? Panic strikes, fear strikes, survival mode. Why am I using that example? Because you could hear all this stuff. You can read all the books. You can read all the scripture. You can hear all the seminars. But when you're in it, a lot of that goes out the window, and you're stuck with figuring it out. And what happens is, again, what's in your heart, what's in your mouth. Is it a truth that coming from your mouth, or a truth that has been internalized in your heart and has been made flesh and something that you can actually apply to your life? And that's really the whole point of this. How can we apply this in our life the right way every time. It's hard though. And I think I'll be the first one to admit, I hear a lot. I know a lot. Do I apply it all the time? No, I do not. And I think that's just the truth. And I think we want to preface that with these conversations. Is there anything you wanted to say on that? Or any like final thoughts on that?
No, you said a lot, and I thought a lot, but I don't have a lot to say. I think you're right. I mean, don't let that fear and panic drive you into making decisions that make this transition longer.
Yeah.
Or steer you in the wrong direction. I think in moments like that, find your people.
Mm-hmm.
Transition is hard. It's harder alone.
Absolutely.
And so find your people, find your community, find someone, find people who can hold you accountable, people who will listen to you when you're struggling or thinking, or when you need prayer especially. Don't be afraid to ask for prayer. It is crazy, I think, how hard it has been for me to ask for prayer. I can imagine it's hard for others. So yeah, I would say find community, find people who will hold you through this, pray with you through this, and sit with you. Yeah. Even if it's to do nothing. But transition is hard. It's harder alone. Don't do it alone. Yeah. Don't do it by yourself. Everybody is transitioning into something, so everybody understands everybody. Absolutely. And that would be probably my final thought, is to don't do it alone, because alone is harder.
I love that you ended with that, because that was, if you weren't going to say that, I was going to make sure to say it, because
it's okay. You weren't going to say it. It's okay.
No, because I wanted to end off with that, with community, because we always go back to that. We've been trying to go back to that every podcast. Like, it's about community. It's who you're with. It's who you're around. Surround yourself with people. Again, look at Job. His friends are not the people you want in your life. You want people that are going to point you to Christ, point you to hope, point you to faith, and know that we're praying for you guys and we're here for y'all. And like Xiomi said, hop in community and find the right people. Yeah. Because it won't eliminate transition, but it'll make it so much easier. So those are our thoughts on transition, navigating it, dealing with it, and what we believe are some practical and applicable things to your life if you are struggling or dealing with transition. With that being said, we appreciate y'all. Next episode will be a special one, and we cannot wait to see y'all there. So hit us with the outro.
Oh my goodness. Have fun.
Have fun.
Go live your best life.
Go live not your life, your best life. That's a new one. And?
I always say best life.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do. Go back and listen to it. Go live your best life.
Oh, wait, you're right.
Wow.
That's true. Go live your best life.
You ruined my whole outro.
No, run it back.
And go get coffee with friends.
And go get coffee with friends. We will see y'all in episode 6. Take it easy. Love you guys.